Welcome back to the channel. My name's Adam Smith, and inside this GameFound preview series, I am very excited to dive into gameplay with you all to show you exactly how Reichbusters Reloaded from Monolith Games flows and operates. But first, just want to mention, if you're looking for the campaign page link, I've got it for you in the pinned comment and video description. All information on the campaign can be found there. It's also worth mentioning I've released a prototype unboxing for this one, as well as a how to set up video. So if you haven't checked those videos out yet, I recommend you check them out first before watching this one, as the prototype unboxing will show you all the components that came as part of the demo kit, even if you don't see all of them during this gameplay portion of the series. Also worth mentioning that the how to setup shows each and every step of how this got to the table, which is also really informative. So you can find all those videos in a link in the top right hand corner. Without further ado, let's dive into the mission briefing together. We'll talk about the overall flavor text, the objectives, the special rules, and we'll also talk about the community's decision as to who is holding the demolition charge card. Mission 0A, the Abode of Horror. Dr. Schneider, an Australian professor renowned for his expertise in fields as diverse as archaeology and fundamental physics, was recently blacklisted by the global academic community in the wake of several fanciful publications mixing mysticism and science. Normally, such highbrow squabbles would be of no concern to the Allies. However, the intelligence services have learned that Schneider's been recruited by the Reichbusters. Convoys of troops and equipment have been photographed traveling towards his manor near Lake Prebersee. And an intercepted message mentioned a certain Project Sternator. The Allies must find out more, and what better way than to send the Reichbusters to the source. The team parachutes into the forest not far from the manor. An imposing building. However, its elegance is spoiled by a wire fence and multiple watchtowers filled with soldiers. The Reichbusters also notice that there are bloodstains on the courtyard floor, and that a service door appears to have been smashed and hastily repaired. But it's nothing they haven't seen before, so they didn't feel any immediate concern, at least not until they hear a long, inhuman howl coming from inside the mansion. Now I want to draw your attention to the objectives section of this briefing, because you'll see it's broken into two different levels of difficulty. We got the cadet and the veteran. So going into the mission, you can decide what level of difficulty you want to push for. And in the final version, you're going to see cadet, veteran, and legend. So there'll be even another one on top of this too. So the cadet one here has a stealing documents from an office. It's a token, and that individual needs to reach the exit. That will let us succeed at the cadet level of difficulty. And then you got the veteran one, which has us also going ahead and blowing up the portal. It's worth mentioning, if you want to go up the tiers of difficulty, you still have to complete the objectives in order from the lowest difficulty up to the highest. Now I'm going to try and push for the veteran difficulty right out of the gates, because I threw this back to the community in the how to set up video as to who was going to hold the demolition charge card. And you can see in the special rules section here, it talks about the demolition charge. Someone needs to take that loot card and then hold it on their person. They're going to be using that to blow up the portal. The final thing I want to draw your attention to is that there is no entrance tile for this mission. There is an entrance tile that exists for other missions, but this one, we have our individuals right inside the courtyard from the get-go. As I mentioned prior, I put up a poll in my YouTube community posts area on my channel, as well as in the Discord, and then combined the voting between both of them to determine who's going to be holding the demolition charge loot card. It is a loot card, and the loot cards look like this on the back side. So it's going to take up one of the 3 slots available for the character, and the loot cards are kept on the right-hand side of the dashboards. There are 3 positions for loot cards. The Discord poll was favoring Brick, but the YouTube poll was favoring O'Reilly, and O'Reilly had more votes overall when combining both of the totals together, so O'Reilly is going to be taking the demolition charge. So thanks again for all the votes that came in on that, and hopefully this is the right character to hold these charges. It's going to go in one of the 3 positions for loot cards that he has. Our first objective is the document sitting in this office right here, represented by a documents token. The second objective is the portal, represented by a miniature. There's also a demolition charge token there to remind us that's what we need to do when we get there. And the door at the very back of the mansion on the opposite side has an exit tile behind it. That is the door we got to head through once we've got the documents, and hopefully once we've blown up the portal. So we've read the briefing, we know our objectives, and we know where we need to go in order to complete those objectives in order to secure a victory. So now let's talk about how things can go south on us. We'll start with the mission tracker over here, and we'll also talk about how we can have this mission result in a failure. A mission is divided into two phases, the pre-alarm phase and the post-alarm phase. In the pre-alarm phase, the squad is going to be trying to move as quietly as possible through the corridors, slipping under the radar of the guards and the surveillance systems. And what's going to happen is the heroes are going to be taking actions which will be generating noise, which again can attract the attention of the enemies. And your heroes are not going to be able to go unnoticed forever because eventually the enemy will be alerted to your presence and sound the alarm. So it's really a balance of trying to avoid that for as long as possible while also trying to make as much progress as possible. Now, once the alarm is sounded, then you move into the post-alarm phase, during which the noise is no longer a concern. You don't even have to track it anymore, but the thing you do have to deal with is enemy reinforcements spawning every turn. There are three important tokens that are on the mission tracker. You have the mission tracker token, which is going to only move up in the upkeep phase at the end of every round, one space. Then you have the discretion token. This token is going to move backwards towards the mission tracker token as you generate noise. So if I shoot a gun that is one noise, it's going to move the discretion token one back. Once these two tokens meet, no matter where they meet, then the discretion token is going to be flipped over and it's going to be placed up here to sound the alarm. And the third and final token with the skull on it is the endgame token, and once your mission tracker token reaches your endgame token, you're going to trigger the endgame. Now, there are three major ways that the alarm can trigger, and I talked about one of them. One is, again, if the discretion token meets the mission tracker token. That's one of the ways the alarm can trigger. Another way it can trigger is if an active enemy, in other words, an enemy that you can actually see in miniature form, has line of sight, can draw line of sight to a hero. That is also going to trigger an alarm. And the last one, which is quite obvious, is if you use a weapon that has an icon on it of an explosion, it's a red explosion icon, that is definitely going to trigger the alarm. Once the alarm triggers, as I mentioned before, noise doesn't matter anymore. You can be as loud as you want, but the reinforcements are going to start pouring in every single turn. On top of that, also all of the enemy tokens that are on the board, in other words, the ones you don't know who and what they are just yet, are going to spawn. So everybody is going to become alert to your presence. Now that you understand a little bit more about the mission tracker, noise, and alarms, let's talk about the end of the game. The mission's going to end as soon as one of the following conditions is met. The first one is if the heroes have completed their mission objectives and the mission tracker token there on the far left is on the same space as the endgame token on the far right, or any space behind it, the heroes have succeeded. The second way it can end is if the heroes have not fulfilled their mission objectives before the mission tracker token reaches the space directly after the endgame token, then the heroes have failed the mission. And the other way that things can go south is if all four heroes are down, the heroes have failed, and you're downed by wounds. As players progress through the games, they're going to get wounds, and they're going to be placing those wounds at the bottom of their dashboard. I'll be moving the dashboards to make space for them, but there's one wound space here, 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 and then you'll see a miniature knocked over in that final one, letting you know that once you've got that fourth one, that individual is considered down. Now, once you're downed, it doesn't mean that the game is lost. It's only lost when all four characters are in the downed position. You can get back up, you can recover as an action. And I'll get into the details of that as we get into gameplay, which is starting right now. A round is broken into 3 turns. You have the hero turn, the enemy turn, and the upkeep turn. And here's a high-level view of what those different turns entail. I'll go through each of these specifically with you in round number 1, and then we're going to pick things up as we get into round 2 and onwards. Now inside the hero's turn, as you saw in the reference card just moments ago, there are 3 major things we can do. The first one is to play basic action tokens. The basic action tokens are these circular tokens on the right-hand side of each of the dashboards, and when you want to use one of them, you place it into one of the slots available at the top of your dashboard, and it will tell you what action you can take. So you can draw 2 cards, you can open a door, you can pick things up, you can give and take things with your squad members, you can unjam a weapon. So as you make attacks, and you'll see this as it happens, you'll essentially have your gun jam at certain times. So you'll flip it over if this gun was jammed to the jammed side, and now you can't use that weapon until you unjam it. So you can take a basic action token to unjam this weapon and flip it back over to the opposite side, and is functional yet again. You can vril a weapon. This allows you to supercharge your weapon. Essentially, the token that is here flips over to the opposite side, and now that weapon has become even more powerful, adds red dice into the fray, but there's an expense, or I should say a risk to that, and that is when you use this powerful weapon, it can dole out a lot of damage, but can also give you some nasty wounds on top of it if you roll poorly. So there's that into the equation as well. Now, you've also got moving and attacking, which you can do once on each of them, but you also can use your action cards to do additional moves and additional attacks. So even though it limits those to just one each, you definitely can pull off chained movement and chained attacks if you use your action cards. And then finally, you got recover. For both of your action tokens, you can choose to recover, removing up to 2 wounds from your lower portion of your dashboard to keep you from being downed or to just manage your wounds in general. The next thing you can do during your hero's turn, in amongst all the basic actions you could potentially do with your characters, is to play action cards. You're going to have a hand of cards in the very beginning of the game, and you don't have to spend these. You could accumulate them, as there's no limit to how many cards you can have in your hand, and have really powerful attacks later on to chain things together, or you can sporadically use them as you feel necessary to employ whatever strategy you're trying to do. But this is going to open up the door for actions at the top section of the cards. You'll see for this one here, Old Hand is going to allow you to go ahead and make a +1 black die ranged attack. So there's an example of how you can do an attack beyond what is available from the dashboard with the basic actions. The bottom portion of the card is used as a modifier. So if you choose to use the card as a modifier, you're already doing an action and you're simply adding a modification to that action. Now, your teammates can also help you when you're taking a basic action. So let's say hypothetically that we have Brick here making an attack. So let's say he used his basic action token up here. He moved it into the attack slot. So now he's making the attack. He's got some dice to roll. He's relatively happy with what he could see happening, but he wants to pump it up a bit. So he looks at his hand of cards and finds modifier cards in there, and he can use as many modifier cards as he wants for himself on his own action. So I could go ahead and add an additional 2 green dice to the equation, and I could even re-roll dice that end up being blank. These could be very handy during a roll, or I could keep those cards for a future use if I see more pain and suffering coming down the line that I want to plan for. Now, another advantage to modifier cards is that the other individuals in the same area as you can also add 1 card at a maximum to the equation to help you out. So we could have Claudine here turn around and say, you know what, she wants to help out Brick and add 2 black dice into his roll, or we could have all of them add a card in, but it has to be a single card at maximum for each of the other heroes in the same space. So there's lots of flexibility there to have any hero in the same area provide a single card of support into the equation. And of course, not everybody has to. You can just choose which ones you'd like to add support in to a given action. So that's the general sense of the hero's turn. There's also loot cards, but we currently don't have any loot cards, so I'll talk more about those when we actually accumulate them. We technically have the demolition charge, but we're holding on to it because we need to detonate the portal. We'll start things off with Sally. She's going to play Run Forest. This is an action as denoted by the icon right here. The one beside it here tells us we're going to discard this card after use. It'll go in her discard pile. It says all operational heroes on your tile can move 1 or 2 areas, ignoring enemies. This is a fantastic card, as being able to get all this movement for all of my individuals on this tile that I'm on allows me to get into position to be able to try and take down the individuals on the watchtowers. My squad is now in position thanks to Sally's card, which is now in her discard pile, so each one of them got to move either 1 space or 2 space without having to deal with any enemies, but there's no enemies on these ground levels right now for us, and some of them even got into base positions on the watchtower, which is nice. So we have O'Reilly here who went 2 spaces and is at the ground level of this watchtower. Then we had Brick just go 1 space or 1 area over because he is quite noisy. I'll show you this on the dashboard a little later, but essentially there are noise markers next to the weapons that they can use, and Brick's, both of his, have 3. And that's really going to move the token on the track, which I really don't want to have happen. So he's going to kind of sit out from being part of this equation on the watchtowers right now, but get ready to eventually crack the door and get inside. The other individuals are getting in position. We have the other 2, Sally as well as Claudine, on the base portions of their watchtower as they were adjacent to it. So they were able to go 1 move and then 2 move to get into the base level. They only need 1 more move each when they're at the base level to get up to the very top platform. A quick correction on the miniatures used. We actually have Claudine heading up north, and we're going to have Sally heading off to the west. We're going to go with Sally right now. She's going to use one of her basic action tokens in order to go up to the platform level. It's worth mentioning the second that Sally moved into the base space here, she was within 1 space adjacent to the soldier. The soldier has a range of 2 and can clearly see her down at the base level. So at that moment, this enemy became active, which only means something when we hit the enemy phase. Sally certainly wants to attack, and it's worth mentioning every single squad member has their bare hands. So when I talked about Brick having just weapons, he still has the ability to use his bare hands if he wants to. So he can be silent, but bare hands are not as powerful, obviously, as having a combat knife or a machine gun. The bare hands only provide 1 black die, whereas if you start using weapons, it's typically 2 or higher. Sally's going to use her second basic action to do an attack, and we are going to use her pistol. I could go with bare hands, but I think I'm going to be okay with just 1 point of noise. So we're going to use the pistol, which has the keyword pistol whip and lethal. All the keywords for each of the heroes are right on their dashboard, so you don't even have to go reference the rulebook, which is awesome. Lethal here says, during an attack test, you can reroll every black blank and every red blank once each, which is awesome. Pistol Whip says you can make a melee attack on an enemy in your area using a ranged weapon without making noise. That Pistol Whip keyword is pretty awesome because now she can use the pistol as a melee weapon, and that means no noise will be generated. Now we have to find out the defensive value of this soldier. To find that on the mission card, you'll see a green icon on the far right hand side for the soldier across the row of C, and you'll see it says 4. So Sally's got 2 dice going into this attack. She has no other people in her squad in her same space, so nobody can provide a card for modification, but she can use her own cards to modify the roll or increase it if she wants. It's also worth mentioning on the black dice, these are the least of all of the dice. They have the ability to get 3 successes, as you can see on the top one. The bottom one there is a special symbol, and that will actually generate 2 automatic successes and also allow you to choose from a cool ability that ties into that special icon. I'm going to use this modifier card as it adds a special die icon into the equation, which is awesome. This card is discarded after use. I also have Lethal, which allows me to reroll any black dice that have a blank result, so let's see how we do. That was an incredible roll. The defense of the soldier is just 4, and we need to either meet or exceed it to take it out and give it 1 wound. It only has 1 health as depicted on the mission card, so this amount of successes is going to kill it on its own just from the dice. But this special icon I added into the fray has a benefit of not only providing 2 additional successes, so this total roll is 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, but it also allows me to trigger something special. There are 4 things we can decide to spend a special on. One is to roll 1 more die, rolling an additional die of the same type. We certainly don't need that. We can trigger an effect, so some skills, weapons, and loot cards have an effect that can only be triggered by spending a special result. I don't really need to do that right now and don't want to, but in the future, we certainly might make use of that. The other one we can do is to drop loot, so we can spend the special result to make an enemy kill drop loot as long as that enemy is able to drop loot. And finally, the last thing we can do, if it's a red die only when you get that special result, which this one isn't, you can undo an overload. And I talked about this before, when you eventually rill your weapons, you'll have powerful weapons, you'll be rolling red dice in the equation. If you happen to land a special, that can allow you to offset the overload icon that can come from a red die. So for example, if we had a real weapon and we went and rolled something like this into the equation, and we also had the overload symbol, which is this into the equation, instead of having to deal with any kind of wound that would come from the overload, the actual special icon could be used to cancel this out. On the mission card itself, right down the center, you'll see in the background a picture of a loot card on certain rows. So you'll see for the soldier row, there is a picture of a loot card, so we can choose to have this special icon drop a loot card under the fallen soldier. Sally did a fantastic job pistol whipping the enemy with no noise generated, nothing to worry about on the mission tracker. A loot card now exists there, and she can choose to pick this up in the future if she wishes. With the West Watchtower taken care of, O'Reilly's focused on the East Watchtower, and he is 2 spaces away from getting up to the top platform. He is currently on the ground level. He needs to move to the base level and then up to the platform level. He can use one of his basic action tokens to get a move to get him to the base level. And then he's going to go ahead and use a card for a modifier, and that's going to increase how much movement he has. He can move an additional area when making a move action. A reminder that O'Reilly was on the ground level, which is 2 spaces away from the platform level, again, going from ground to base to platform. So this soldier with a range of 2 was able to see O'Reilly coming. It is active at this point, but we're going to try and take this thing out to make sure it doesn't activate on the enemy turn. O'Reilly's got some pretty cool melee weapons. Here they generate no noise, of course. One is a wrench and one is a sledgehammer. So the wrench here has lethal, which again allows to reroll black dice, which is the kind of dice that we're going to get with this equation. It also allows rerolls for red, but we don't have any red with this yet. It's not drilled. And then the sledgehammer here does 3. It has the deadly keyword, and deadly says once per attack test, you can spend a special to add 3 successes. That definitely increases the odds of actually taking the enemy out. So O'Reilly will use his last basic action token in order to do an attack here. He's going to be using the sledgehammer. He's got 3 black dice, and he's going to try and see what he can pull off with them. I think that's enough, so I won't add any modifications into it. Let's see if we can get the 4 we need, and we did not. Now, one thing we did get, which kind of saves us a little bit, gives us an opportunity, is the special result is an automatic 2 successes, so we're on our way, but we need 2 more to take out this soldier. We can then use this special result for an additional black die roll, so we can hope to get something else on this. And yes, you can land another special and add 2 more successes in, and then be able to reroll another die after that. So you do have ways to mitigate the dice rolls. Here's hoping we get lucky. Oh my gosh, that is going to be the 4 successes we need, and we'd be able to go ahead and roll a new die into the equation and continue on. We'd stop right there, but we got the 4 successes we needed anyway, so that soldier's been taken out. So it ended up being a perfect example because we got a special, then we needed to roll another black die to try to get up to 4 successes. I landed another special, but at that point, getting the second special, I wouldn't need to roll an additional die like I did. So what would happen is we would get the 4 successes we need to take down this thing, but the second special I got, I can now spend to get a loot card off this soldier. Pretty awesome. We cleared out the West Watchtower and the East Watchtower, and it's also worth mentioning if you're shooting from the top platform of a watchtower down to the ground level and you have range to that area, you get a +1 on your die roll for having advantage of height. Now, some of you might be wondering, well, wait a second, aren't these soldiers aware of your presence? Like, as you try to make moves up the watchtower, don't they happen to notice you? Don't they react to your movements as you get closer? Well, certain enemies will, and certain enemies won't. So the officer in this case will not, but there's other enemies that will. So as you get closer to them, there's an awareness icon in the top left-hand corner of the enemy that tells you that enemy is smart enough to be able to detect you as you try to get in close to them. And that can be nasty. We'll talk more about that when it happens, but you can see the soldiers don't have that icon. Now it's all up to Claudine. Can she clear the North Watchtower? Well, she needs to generate 1 move to do so. We can easily do that with a basic action token, so we'll go ahead and spend a token, placing it on her dashboard to move her up to the platform. As she makes it to the top of the platform, she's got 2 enemies to deal with up there, so she's going to use a card from her hand known as an exploit card, and it looks like this. It only has an action on it. You'll notice there's no modifier bottom section of it whatsoever, so this card says, make as many melee attacks as there are enemies in your area, targeting a different enemy for each attack. So we can go ahead and use the basic action token to generate 1 attack, but then use this card to allow us to get a +1 on the melee attacks and be able to attack each individual enemy in our area. This is a great time to talk about special abilities on the characters. You'll see it straight through the middle based on the type of character that they are. She says once per hero's turn, you can move into an adjacent area if there is at least 1 enemy in it. So in other words, we didn't have to spend a basic action token to move. We could have just taken advantage of her special ability for free. And just for clarity, the Angel of Death card is an action, which means it allows us to go ahead and make an attack against all the enemies in our area without having to spend a basic action token in the attack area. So that's pretty sweet, which means we get to save those to potentially do other things after she's gone after these soldiers. Claudine's going to use her knife to try and take out the first soldier. It's got 2 black dice plus the 1 from the Angel of Death card, so she's got 3 going into this. It's got the precise keyword, and that states during an attack test, add a success for each blank black side of the die you roll, and also any red, but we don't have any red anyway. So essentially, if we roll something like this, we get 2 successes from the special, and we get 1 success for each of the blanks. So even blanks can help us out. We need to get at least 4 to take out the soldier. Let's see how we do. And we got it. So getting the 2 successes off this, 2 from here is 4. That's enough to take out the soldier. We use this special then to generate a loot card. Now let's go ahead and roll for the other soldier up there and see if we can pull off another loot card. The more loot cards we get, the better going into the mansion. That would certainly be beneficial for us. We got ourselves 2 specials that time. We can absolutely make use of this. We got 4. That's enough to take out that soldier, and we can generate a loot. Claudine took out both of the soldiers and the North Watchtower with 2 loot cards there. We've got 1 here on the west side and 1 on the east side. It's also worth mentioning when these loot cards drop, when you kill an enemy, they're actually face up. So Sally could go after a radio that's here, and again would have to use an action in the future to pick this up. We'll flip over the 2 loot tokens in Claudine's space. There's a helmet here as well as a Vril orb. And O'Reilly over here's got 1 loot card to check out. And it is a Vril shield. That sounds very useful. Claudine's got both of her basic actions. She's going to use each of them to pick up each of the loot cards in her space. Claudine's got the Vril orb. It says you can make an attack test with 1 red die, or you can ignore an overload effect. That's pretty awesome. You discard this after you use it for whichever option you choose. And then she's got an ongoing effect here, a defensive bump with a helmet. Loot cards, as I mentioned, are stored on the right-hand side of the dashboard, and while they cost an action to actually pick them up, they don't cost anything if you want to drop them, and you can only carry 3 as there's only 3 available slots. Now, 3 of the squad members have used all their basic action tokens and also used some of their cards, whether it be for actions or modifications to actions. But at this point, Brick has not been used. And the question I have is whether I want to go cracking into a door to find out what is going to spawn for that green token and maybe not having what I need to take them all out. So what I'm going to do to be safe and play it safe to ensure that no alarm gets triggered and I don't ruin my element of surprise is I'm going to hold back and have Brick go ahead and use both of his basic action tokens to draw 2 2 cards twice over. That's going to allow him to get 4 additional cards into his hand, and again, there's no limit on how many cards you can have in hand. This will certainly provide some more options for me as I go into his turn in the next round. We're now shifting to the enemy's turn, and the very first thing we do is the surveillance step, and this only occurs if we're in the pre-alarm phase, and that's exactly what we're in. So we check across all the different types of enemies, following the mission cards, starting from the very top all the way down through the rows to determine if any active enemy has line of sight to our heroes. So working from the top of this card to the very bottom, there is not a single enemy type of any of these that have line of sight to our heroes. All the enemies that are currently in play are inactive, so when we move into the next step, which is to move and attack with any enemies, none of them are going to do anything because nobody's aware of our presence just yet, and the final thing we do during the enemy's turn is we regenerate or provide reinforcements into the equation, and that only happens during post-alarm, and we have not set the alarm off yet, so nothing else for the enemy's turn. We now go to upkeep. The first thing we check for is any cards we have in play which has that icon in the very center there. That's an ongoing effect for the round of play. In this case, we didn't use any of those cards, but you'll likely see those in the future. And at this point during the upkeep phase, they are removed and discarded. Next up, all of your heroes are going to be able to draw a card if they have fewer than 5 cards in hand. Brick certainly has more than 5 cards, so he's not drawing anything, but the rest of them have less. Claudine has 3, Sally has 2, and O'Reilly has 3, so each one of them get to draw a card. And here's an up-close look at what each of them got going into their hand. Now basic action tokens for all the characters are reset, so you can see, for example, Bricks over here are back in position, everybody else is as well. The next step is a nice bonus for the heroes. If you're inside a space with no enemies whatsoever and there's a loot card in there or even a token, you can now pick one of these up. So Sally's going to pick up the radio, and O'Reilly's going to pick up the Vril shield, and I'm really excited about this one, seeing as he's the one holding the demolition charge. A shield sounds great. The final step of the upkeep phase is to move the mission tracker token 1 space down the mission track, so from 1 to 2. If it happens to land in the same space as the discretion token, the red one there in the center, that's going to trigger the alarm, and you go through a series of steps at that point, and you'll be in the post-alarm section of the game. If the mission tracker token lands on the end game, then you're going to check to see if you've met all your objectives at that point, and if you haven't, well, you have failed the mission. So even though I was absolutely dead silent in round number 1, time is still ticking, and these enemies are going to pick up on the fact that we are inside of this mansion messing around. That's going to do it for round number 1, which completes the basics of how a round of Reichbusters Reloaded operates. Now, of course, there's nuances as we get further in. I'll discuss those as we run into them, but the pace of the playthrough is going to pick up from here on in. Going into round number 2, we have a number of our squad members on top of platforms, watchtowers. There's different ways we can leave a platform area. We can choose to just move down normally, so moving from platform to base, but making a regular move action as you've seen before. We can also jump to the ground area. We roll a red die, and for a result that shows the icon that is overload, then the hero sustains a permanent wound, which is not a good thing, but it can certainly save a little bit of time. I'm going to choose to be crazy and have all of my squad members on top of platforms jump down to the ground level. The ground level's right here, so they're going to go straight down. They're each going to roll a red die, and if they happen to land this overload result, that's going to be a permanent wound for them. So hopefully that does not happen. The reason I'm doing this is, well, it's kind of entertaining, and also because the mission tracker token is ticking its way down to the endgame token, so we only have so much time, and I don't want to burn a lot of it just moving down through the watchtower. So let's go ahead and roll. We'll start off for Sally and see how we do. Sally is safe, got down without any injuries. Let's go ahead and roll for Claudine. Hopefully the same thing can occur. Come on. Yes. Last but not least, O'Reilly's going to make the final jump. Hopefully he can make it without getting hurt, and he does. Well, that's great news. We just saved ourselves a little bit of time, which could come in beneficial later on. Let's head to this door. Now, it's a tough call as to whether or not I should move everybody into position in the same area before I crack the door, or whether I should just have Brick crack the door first and see what's there. We have no idea what's on the other side of the door, making this all the more exciting. So I think what I'll do is keep my squad members where they're at, and Brick is going to use one of his basic action tokens up here in order to open the door. Brick tells his team he's got this and kicks the door wide open. The moment the door is open, a line of sight can be drawn from where Brick is standing in that area straight into that green token. We're going to flip it over and find out what spawns. Not a single soul is in that area. We flip over the spawn token and there's no icons on it, so there's nothing to resolve. Brick's going to use his last basic action token to move into the mansion. As he steps safely inside, the rest of his squad members follow suit. Claudine's going to go next. She's going to use a basic action token to be able to move 1 space. So she'll move from this area into this area, and then she's going to use a modification here called progression. It says +1 area when making a move action. That'll get her right in front of the door. Sally's going to do a similar thing. She's over here at the ground level. She's going to do a basic action token to move into this area and then use a card from her hand for a modification to move as well. O'Reilly's going to follow the group and is going to move one space using a basic action token for movement, but he doesn't have any modifier cards to help his movement. Next, I'm going to use an action card for Claudine. She's got one that allows her to make a move, and it's worth mentioning when you use it for an action card at the very top section, you don't have to do everything that's listed. You just have to do things top to bottom. So it says discard one of your wound cards. If you don't happen to have one, you can skip right over that, but it does say to move one area. That'll get her a little bit further into the mansion, and also Brick has a card called Indestructible, where he can do a similar thing, and he's going to use this to move one area as well as an action. At this point, Brick is pretty happy. He's going to stay put right there. Claudine has one more basic action token to spend. She's going to use it in order to drop 2 cards. This adds the following 2 cards into her hand, and one of them actually allows her to move if she wants. So let's go ahead and do it. It says to move one area, and she gets to draw another action card. This card will be added to her hand, and she has now moved into the exact same room as Brick. Sally and O'Reilly both have a basic action left. They're going to use them in order to draw cards, each of them getting 2. Here are the 2 cards that I drew up for Sally. We got Go, 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 which sounds very useful right now, and Take That. Before we go ahead with O'Reilly's drawing of 2 cards, let's go ahead and use this right away. We'll go ahead as an action and discard this card. Another operative hero on your tile moves one area, so that's going to be O'Reilly, and then we get to move one area. The 2 of them together are going to run inside the mansion. Now we'll resolve Riley's draw of 2 cards. I've already placed the basic action token here. Check this out. We got some awesome movement cards here. We'll go ahead and use the one on the left to allow us to move and then draw an action card. O'Reilly gains this new card in hand and has now moved into position, so all 3 are right at the door. That's going to do it for the hero's turn. We now move to the enemy's turn, and in this enemy phase, no one can draw line of sight to us. No one still knows we're here, so we're good there. There's no active enemies to move, there's no active enemies to attack us, and there's no regeneration or reinforcements coming in whatsoever because the alarm has not sounded. So the enemy's turn is done, and now we go to the upkeep phase. Inside the upkeep phase, we discard any cards with the ongoing effect icon. We haven't used any currently, so nothing to worry about there. We draw action cards for anybody that doesn't have 5 or more cards in hand right now. So the individuals that don't have 5 or more are Claudine and Sally, so each of them are drawing up a card. Here's an up-close look at the cards going into each of their hands. All our basic action tokens are reset. If we happen to be in a room with a token or loot card, we can pick things up now. We don't currently have any of that going on. And then we move the mission tracker 1 space. The token moves from 2 to 3, getting ever closer to the discretion token. That's going to complete round number 2. Let's head into round number 3. As we get into round number 3, I want to talk about a different type of card you might see coming through your hand of cards. So for Claudine, for instance, we've got 2 cards here, and you can see on the left-hand side, we've been using a lot of cards that have the action icon, which is the gray icon in the center. For Bloodthirsty, that lets you know that you're using that as an action, whereas you can find a top section of the card that has a lightning bolt, and that means a reaction. It's not an action, it's happening based on the text written right on the card. So there's a lot of strategy in terms of using the different actions at different time frames for your squad, using the cards in different ways, many different ways to chain things together. So without further ado, let's get into action on round number 3. We're going to crack that door open. I'm going to use a basic action token for Brick. He's going to crack the door open. It's also worth mentioning you will eventually find doors that have locks on them, and they'll have a special token for that. You'll have to have a key in order to access it. For this mission, the doors are just closed, but they're not locked. So at this point in time, we're opening this door up. As soon as we do, we can draw a line of sight, or the enemy can draw a line of sight to our heroes, and so the token straight ahead of us is going to reveal. This time we're not as fortunate. There are certainly some things to spawn, so we're going to head to the mission card. The token we revealed had 2 C's on it and an E, so we're going to be grabbing 2 soldiers and 1 of E. With those enemies now placed, the token is discarded, and if any other inactive enemy tokens are sitting within line of sight of the new enemies that were just revealed, they're going to spawn now as well, so the area off to the left is going to spawn. And this one's bringing in all kinds of pain. We have 3 Ds and 2 Es. So that's going to bring 3 zombies and 2 Algin. There is a lot of activity in this back room. Here's a look at the cards that are specific to the enemy types we now have in play. So we have the soldier here, and you'll also see some additional abilities here that might be a part of the equation or might not be. In this case, we don't have any officers, so that is not going to be something we have to worry about. We have this one here, which has some things going on like armless, knockback, and pursuit. And then behind this, we have the zombies. Now, at this point, we have decisions to make. Do we try to walk into this room and take out as many individuals with melee attacks quietly as possible and hope to be able to clear out the room without triggering the alarm for this round? Or do we just go in guns blazing, triggering the alarm and seeing all the fun that will come from that? We also have the potential to use explosives. I actually have a card or two with some of my characters to use grenades, which would immediately signal the alarm after using them, but it would very much help with clearing a lot of enemies very quickly. Let's start things off with Claudine. She's got some great melee cards. She'll use one of her basic action tokens to move into the room. She's now going to play one of her action cards, which is called a Real Lady. It's this one right here, and it states it's an ongoing effect. You can use as an action to make 2 melee attacks with +2 black dice into the equation for each of them, targeting a different enemy for each attack, and because it's an ongoing effect, we get to uptick our defense if we need it. We'll start off by targeting the soldiers for these 2 melee attacks back to back. So she gets her 2 regular dice when using her knife. And again, this is going to be a silent attack, but she gets +2 thanks to the card she is using, which is awesome. She's got 4 dice, should be more than enough to make this happen. It ends up being a perfect roll. She got the 4 successes she needed right off the dice, and she got 1 special icon she can use to drop a loot card for one of the soldiers. Very useful loot just dropped. It's armor-piercing rounds. That could come in very handy. Now let's go ahead and make the second melee attack. Again, we get 2 dice going in for the knife, 2 for this card right here. We're going to roll our dice and see how we do. Taking out the next soldier, hopefully. Yes. That's what I like to see. So that action is now complete. 2 loot cards are sitting there. We only have 1 more enemy in our same space. For the time being, I'm going to have Claudine stop right there. Sally's going to go next, and she's going to go ahead and use one of her basic action tokens to move. And then she's going to use a second action card as a modifier, and that's going to allow her to move an additional space. Sally's way in the back at the moment, but she's going to run to the same spot as Claudine. Now, Sally's special ability on her dashboard is called Rally. It says when you enter an area containing at least 1 enemy, which she's inside of an area with 1 enemy, a hero in an adjacent area can move into your area. So she's going to rally Brick to move forward 1 position, getting into the room. With her last basic action token, she's going to choose to use her bare hands to make an attack against the alien in her space. And she's going to attempt to remain quiet doing this, so she's just going to use her bare hands, no guns whatsoever, which means she just gets a single die when she makes this attack. Now, the other thing to note is she does have a card she could use to add into this. She's going to go ahead and use the bottom portion to modify for an additional 2 black dice, so she'll have 3 black dice going into the roll. Let's see how we do. Hopefully we get the 5 necessary, because that's the defense value of this alien. This thing rolled right off camera here, but we got a 2 success, which is great. Now, with this, we have 4 total because we have 2 off the star and then 1 for each of the other ones. Now, we could choose to use the radio to re-roll all of the blanks, but we don't have any blanks. So the best thing to probably do is to cash in that special, keeping it again for the 2 successes, but cash it in for another black die roll. All we need to see is at least 1 success on this die roll, and we've got it. Yes. Sally is able to take out the alien and only has 1 wound. Again, checking the mission card, you can determine exactly defensive value as well as how many wounds you need on a particular thing to kill it off. Also worth mentioning, because it's an alien, it would actually drop an alien loot card because I had an extra special to spend, and that's what I want to use it on. But there is no alien loot card in the prototype, so I'm just going to take a regular loot card. We found ourselves some body armor, so there's bandages, armor-piercing rounds, and body armor in that space to pick up, which is awesome. And of course, if we just leave those in there and have those individuals left in that space, we can pick these all up for free if we wish, but we have a lot of problems on the left-hand side right now to still deal with. Let's go ahead and get O'Reilly into the action. He's got some great melee weapons, and he's got this card here. He's going to use at the top for an action, discarded to move 1 area and then move another area. So he runs full sprint right into the action. O'Reilly's going to use one of his most powerful cards. This one's an action card, will be discarded after use. It says to make an attack. We get a +1 red die into the equation. It says all other miniatures in the target area are attacked with the same success total. Riley's going into this attack, choosing to use the sledgehammer, has the deadly keyword once per attack. You can spend one of your special symbols to add 3 successes. Good to know. We get 3 black dice off of this. The card we used to make the attack in the first place added a red die into the equation, and as you can see, his special ability says when performing an attack test, you can add an extra red die. We're going to go ahead and do it. We're going to hope not to see the overloaded icon, because that, of course, will have a permanent wound coming his way. But remember, if we happen to roll one of the special icons on the other die, we can cancel it out. Now, before we make the roll, here's a look at the defensive nature of these enemies. So the zombie here, 7, and the alien is 5. So long as we can get 7 total successes on this roll, then we can guarantee we can clear the entire room. With the dice in hand, the 2 extra reds should really help with this equation. Let's see how we do. Oh, that is a crazy roll. So we got ourselves 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. That is more than enough to do what we need to do. Plus, we have the extra special in there so we can drop a single loot card. That was one of O'Reilly's most powerful cards he just used, and he was able to clear out the entire room with that sledgehammer attack. With the room cleared, there's armor-piercing rounds in there as well, and yet again, we've cleared all of the active enemies that have line of sight to us, which means we've kept the alarm at bay, which is incredible. Now at this point, we really want to focus on potentially cracking the door off to the right and getting inside. However, we are perfectly positioned with the amount of loot cards in each of the areas to be able to sit tight where we're at, and we'd automatically pick everything up, which would be pretty cool. But I do want to make a little extra progress, seeing as O'Reilly was able to just absolutely decimate that area. Brick and Claudine both have 1 action token left to spend on their dashboards, and O'Reilly has 2. I'm going to push because I think I've got the actions I need and the cards I've got in hand to continue on with this hero turn. So what we're going to do is going to have Brick use his final action token to crack open the door to that office. With the door cracked open, we can now draw line of sight into the room. The area accessory that's in there is going to flip over, as well as the spawn token. We start with the enemy spawn token, and it's going to be a C, C, and D, and that's going to be 2 soldiers and a zombie. Thank goodness so far we haven't dealt with any enemies that have the alertness icon in the top left-hand corner of their enemy card, so these individuals just spawn and that's it. If they did have that icon, at this point in time, they would move and attack us immediately. Now at this point, the area accessory in there is going to flip over, and we'll find out what it is. The card states Vril Device Blueprints. This is a very cool card. A hero can carry out the Vril weapon action in this area. So this is what I was talking about before in terms of upgrading your existing weapons, because again, Vril is what is being controlled and utilized by these enemies, and when you find a card like this, you can then actually start to make your weapons convert over to it using Vril in order to get maximum effectiveness out of your weapons at the expense of potentially getting permanent wounds for when it overloads. Now for a second I panicked because I looked at Claudine's dashboard and just realized, even though I wanted her to go into the room, she's already used a basic action token on her move slot, so she can't take another move action unless it comes from her cards. But remember, she has a special ability called Vigilance, and it says once per hero's turn you can move into an adjacent area if there is at least 1 enemy in it. So she's going to go flying into that office. Claudine busts into the room, and she's going to use an action portion of her card here for Bloodthirsty. This one will be discarded. Its use as an action for the top. It says make 2 melee attacks targeting a different enemy for each attack. Claudine's making a melee attack here, and she's got that ongoing effect card, which is still in play. It only helps with the defensive side of the equation right now anyway, so it's sitting there just to let you guys know. The card we just used is in a discard pile because we're making 2 back-to-back melee attacks, and we're going to get our 2 dice because I want to use my knife, and so that's what I've got going into this equation. I'm going to also add this modifier into the equation because I want to bump up her chances, so she's now got a special symbol. And we're going to aim to go after the zombie first. The zombie is the toughest of the entire group and is at a 7 defensive level. So hopefully with the 2 we have already and the ability to potentially roll another black die if we want to use it for that, we can get to where we need to get to with 7. Let's see what we get off the dice roll. We got ourselves 2. That is not very much. So we have 2 from this. 3, 4. We need to get more. So let's go with another die here, make a roll. We need to see either 3 successes or another special. So we've got a 2 out of 6 chance to make this happen. Yes! So now at this point we have 2 successes from this, 2 successes from this, and 2 more here. So we got a total of 6, and we get to roll an additional black die into the fray. Can we get the 1 success we need? Here's hoping. Oh! As bad as that looks, remember she's got the precise keyword, which means any of her blank results on the black die are going to count for 1 success. So we got the 7 we need. The zombie is gone. That was way too close for comfort. There is no loot card dropping for this enemy though. She now gets to make another attack, and we have to decide if we want to add any modifications into this attack. So another attack with the knife. We've got 2 black dice going in. We only have 2 cards remaining in hand for Claudine. She's got these 2 right here. So you can see on the very bottom, this one here allows us to do an additional move. That's not going to help us right now. And you can see on the bottom of the other one, the tactical move, it will give us a special, which is good. But you can see the grenade at the top, which is super handy. The problem is it will trigger the alarm, which is why I haven't used it yet. But once the alarm is triggered, that card, this one on the left, will be very handy to have in hand. So the question is, do I risk it with just 2 black dice and see whether I can get what I need or what. The other option is I could potentially try and bring somebody else that maybe has movement into the same space as Claudine to be able to help her out. But the problem is that is separate from what she's currently doing, which is making 2 back-to-back melee attacks. So I can't move somebody in right now in the middle of her action. Actually, before I go any further, I could use this reaction card from my hand, which could certainly help me maybe be able to take out both soldiers if the dice are kind to me. This reaction here says, after success on an attack test, which I just got, make an attack. So this would basically beef up the ability for me to do 2 more attacks. Let's go ahead and do it. So we're going to go ahead and make an attack now against a soldier. I'm only rolling 2 black dice, so the chances are not good, but we have the opportunity to clear the room if I can land both of these attacks. Let's see how we do. We got ourselves, oh my gosh, this is crazy. So that is going to be 1 soldier down plus a loot card. Claudine is absolutely wrecking house in that office. Only 1 more enemy remains. Let's go ahead and make our final attack. Now, this is a very stressful roll. This last roll is very crucial for a number of reasons. I don't have any way to get anybody else into that room and make an attack if this doesn't go well. So what I need to do is make sure this happens. So I'm rolling 2 black dice. I got very lucky in the last attack. The next one may not be so lucky. So in order to ensure that, I'm going to go ahead and use the Vril orb that I picked up from Claudine to add into the equation. It says to make this attack test a +1 red die, or we can ignore the overloaded symbol. I'm going to go ahead and add that red die into the equation because I think we're going to need it. I want to remain as quiet as possible for as long as possible, so I've gone ahead and discarded that Vril orb. We're going to go ahead and make a roll here and see if Claudine has what it takes to take down the final enemy in the room. Oh yeah! What an incredible round for the heroes, taking out that entire room, plus also dealing with the office. And with the special icon that I got, I'm dropping loot for the enemy. Claudine has 1 basic action left to spend. She's going to go ahead and use it in order to pick up the objective. And she seems like the perfect person to be holding on to this very crucial objective. The only individual with basic actions left is O'Reilly. He's going to use 1 of them in order to crack the door open. You can see to the left of him, there's nobody to spawn in that central corridor, so he's safe. With his final action token, he's not going to pick up the armor-piercing rounds because he uses melee weapons primarily. He's going to move into that central corridor. And that, my friends, is going to wrap up the hero turn. We move on to the enemy turn. So far, so good. The alarm has not sounded. As we go into the enemy turn, no one can make line of sight to us whatsoever. There's no active enemies that are going to be moving or attacking, and there's no reinforcements coming because the alarm has not been triggered. So we move to the upkeep phase. The ongoing effect card that Claudine put into play earlier, which is this one here with this icon, is discarded. Out of the squad of 4, 3 of them are getting a card added to their hand as they have less than 5 cards currently in hand. All of our squad members with no enemies in their area can now choose to pick up a loot card. So we have lots of options there between Brick and Sally, who can choose between one of the 3 cards lying in their space. And then Claudine has a choice between the grenade or the radio. Claudine knows that the time to be quiet is drawing to an end, so she's picking up the grenade. Now, Brick's been holding on to some cards for a very powerful future turn, so Brick is going to be the one to take the armor-piercing rounds. And finally, Sally is going to go after the body armor as she doesn't have any need for bandages yet. The rest of the loot cards stay exactly where they're at. And the mission tracker token inches 1 space away from the discretion token. It moves from 3 to 4. We're getting very close to the alarm sounding, and it's worth mentioning we have not seen any guns shot yet from our hero's side, so no additional noise to move the discretion token to the left. An example of what a noise icon looks like is like this, and in the final version of the game, you're going to actually see some noise icons on the cards themselves. So certain cards, maybe some of the powerful ones, will begin to have noise icons which will move this discretion token up a space or 2 as you choose to use them. Of course, you have to still use them, and it's your decision to do so, but that will be a part of the equation. What I've been doing is doing everything possible not to use any of my weapons as they generate noise, and the icon is very, very small here in this because you can see each one of these generates 3 noise, which means that discretion token would move 3 positions down just for making a single attack with one of those weapons, whether you hit or miss. As I mentioned before, Claudine has cards in hand that have the explosion icon, the red icon. You can see an example one here for Brick. If you happen to use the top portion of this card, it has that red explosion icon, and at that point, the alarm is triggered no matter what's going on in the mission track. And that, my friends, is going to wrap up part number 1 of Reichbusters Reloaded from Monolith Games. Really hope this video helps you see the flow of the game in action, and stay tuned to the channel as we continue this play to see whether the heroes can get through the alarm phase, which is definitely imminent in the near future, get to the portal and take it down while also trying to all get to the exit. We have a lot more to do, but we've got at least the first objective in hand, so we're about halfway at this point. Thank you guys so much for watching. If you want to find more information about the campaign, you'll find it in the pinned comment and video description. You can also check out the Discord community where we're talking about games on crowdfunding and retail releases at all times. You'll find channels for every single game popping up out of the woodwork. Thank you guys all for watching yet again, and as always, keep on rolling solo.